Good evening. Thanks for joining us tonight. A Fond du Lac County courtroom brought to a standstill this morning as convicted killer Taylor Schabusiness attacked her attorney in court for a second time.
Schabusiness accused of attacking a prison guard at Techita Correctional Institution. Just last week, she was deemed competent to continue with this case. In a First Alert update, Samantha Cavalli brings us what she saw before, during, and after Schabusiness attacked.
It happened in an instant, sending a courtroom into shock once again. Convicted killer Taylor Schabusiness attacks another defense attorney. The 27-year-old walks into the courtroom in Fond du Lac Friday with at least 7 deputies, wearing a belt restraint that her hands are attached to. Just 2 minutes into the preliminary hearing, she eyes the camera, then back at attorney Curtis Julka before. Within seconds, deputies come rushing in. Schabusiness is pushed to the ground, being pinned down almost immediately. Julka remains calm. She was then carried out of the courtroom by her arms and legs. Just 2 years ago, in February 2023, Schabusiness jumping out of her seat during a motion hearing, striking her attorney at the time, Quinn Jolly, in the head. Jolly withdrew from the now closed homicide case 2 weeks later.
I'm going to put a motion in the withdrawal from this matter.
Julka also requesting a motion to withdraw, which Judge Niels denies until after the hearing. An hour later, Schabusiness appears in restraints on Zoom to continue the proceedings. Court documents state in July 2024, she lunged at a nurse at Techita who was treating her for a staple in her arm. The female prison guard stepping in to gain control before being hit over the head with a metal tray.
The only thing that was discussed was like some giggling or some laughing that preceded that. The exact timing of that proceeding was not outlined in the criminal complaint.
The judge finding probable cause to move forward with the case. Julka entering not guilty pleas on Schabusiness's behalf before officially withdrawing from the case. He was unable to comment after the incident. In Fond du Lac, Samantha Cavalli, Action 2 News.